on First at 9, this Monday, the 10th of June 2024. Swift resumption. India to resume halted development projects with Indian investment in Sri Lanka, assures Dr. Jai Shankar during talks with President Ranil Wickremesinghe in New Delhi. Called off. Train operators call off their 4-day strike after assurances given by the Transport Minister. Intensifying. Heavy rains to intensify tomorrow, forecasts the Met Department. Early landslide warnings issued for 3 districts. Increased. Government-owned Alcado plantations begin paying the government-declared daily wage for estate workers despite prevailing controversies. More tourists. Sri Lanka welcomes over 25,000 tourists in the first 10 days of June, helping cross 900,000 for the first 5 months.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a very warm welcome. You're joining us once again on your primetime English news service here at Derana 24 at the beginning of the week. We take you straight to your top stories making headlines tonight. India's former External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jai Shankar, who was sworn in as the new Union Minister, has assured President Ranil Wickremesinghe of restarting development projects with Indian investment in Sri Lanka that were suspended in the recent past. Dr. Jai Shankar made these remarks during a meeting with President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is currently in India to attend the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi for a 3rd term. He also highlighted plans for an industrial zone in Trincomalee to be established by the Indian government in order to attract more foreign investments to Sri Lanka. During the visit, President Wickremesinghe also met Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, who has assured Bangladesh's commitment to supporting Sri Lanka's agricultural modernization program.
Narendra Modi was sworn in as Indian Prime Minister for a 3rd consecutive term yesterday evening after winning last week's Indian general election, also dubbed the Lok Sabha election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took the oath along with 71 ministers of the new coalition government. 30 of them are cabinet ministers, 5 state ministers with independent charge and 36 ministers of state. The portfolios are to be announced later. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who attended the ceremony, met the Bangladesh Prime Minister this morning. Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has assured President Wickremesinghe of Bangladesh's commitment to support Sri Lanka's agricultural modernization program. According to the President's media division, during the discussions, President Ranil Wickremesinghe affirmed his commitment to dispatch a delegation of Sri Lankan agricultural experts to Bangladesh to gather valuable insights for the agriculture modernization program. The President also highlighted the potential for signing a free trade agreement with Bangladesh following the conclusion of the India Free Trade Agreement. Additionally, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh pledged to direct private investors from Bangladesh towards investment opportunities in Sri Lanka, further fostering economic cooperation between the two countries. Consideration was given to the initiation of a passenger ferry service connecting Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. President Wickremesinghe also met the Union Minister in the Modi government, S. Jai Shankar, who held the External Affairs Minister position during Premier Modi's last government. During the meeting, Minister Jai Shankar has assured President Wickremesinghe that India will take steps to recommence India-funded projects that have stalled due to various issues in the recent past. Dr. Jai Shankar also assured that he would visit Sri Lanka soon to coordinate the Prime Minister's visit, which is scheduled in August. He also highlighted plans for an industrial zone in Trincomalee to be established by the Indian government, which will attract numerous Indian investors and potential investors from other countries. Following the meeting, Dr. Jai Shankar highlighted that India recognized the steady progress in India-Sri Lanka relations.
Less sugar, same great taste. From Melbourne.
In our developing story, amid refusal by the Planters Association to implement a daily wage hike announced by the government for estate workers, government-owned Alcador plantations took the first step to effect the increased daily wage from today. Government issued a gazette requesting plantations to pay a wage of 1,700 rupees to estate workers. Chairman of Alcador Plantations, Sumit Jayaratna, said that the plantation took the decision to implement the wage hike as it made profits in the last 4 years.
According to a gazette issued by the Commissioner General of Labour on the 30th of April, the minimum daily wage for tea and rubber estate workers will be 1,350 rupees with an added special allowance of 350 rupees, bringing the total minimum daily wage to 1,700 rupees. However, the Planters Association of Ceylon refused to pay increased wages, arguing that it is unfair of the government to forcefully implement a wage hike when the cost of production is extremely high. However, against the backdrop, government-owned Alcador plantation began paying the increased wages in accordance with the government directive.
The government has issued a notification to pay a wage of 1,700 rupees to estate workers. After adding the EPF and ETF, it will come to around 1,950 rupees and 65 cents. That is a salary increase of 65%. We were able to do it because we have been a profitable firm since 2020.
Meanwhile, the Low Country Labour Union held a protest in Alpitia town demanding an increased daily wage of 1,700 rupees.
මැලිබන් කිරි නිෂ්පාදන මිලදීගෙන මරණයට කැපවූ කිරි ගවයන් නිදහස් කර ගැනීමට ඔබත් දායක වන්න.
Over 250,000 individuals are affected by the prevailing inclement weather patterns hovering over Sri Lanka. It is reported that over 9,000 have sought refuge in 139 safe locations across the country. Meanwhile, the Department of Meteorology expects heavy rains to intensify over parts of Sri Lanka tomorrow owing to southwest monsoon conditions. Considering reports issued by the Met Department, the National Building Research Organisation extended early landslide warnings to Colombo, Kaluthara and Ratnapura.
During the past 24-hour cycle, the highest rainfall of 79.7 millimeters was recorded from the Morelioya area in Kegol. Several areas continue to receive heavy rains owing to the prevailing southwest monsoonal conditions. As per reports of the Disaster Management Centre, 259,990 persons in 14 districts across Sri Lanka are severely affected by the current inclement weather patterns. Today's DMC situation report showed that 9,595 persons are currently seeking refuge in 139 safe locations. Against this backdrop, the Department of Meteorology expects rainfall to intensify over the next few days. Meanwhile, the National Building Research Organisation issued early landslide warnings to 3 districts across the island.
Due to the cessation of the rainfall compared to the previous days, some areas with warning have been removed. Considering prevailing rainfall and the weather forecast issued by the Department of Meteorology, the issued landslide early warning message has been extended until 4 p.m. tomorrow. With that, warning level 1 watch yellow warning was issued to Paduka Division Secretariat in Colombo District, Ingiriya, Matugama and Palindunura Division Secretariat Divisions in Kaltara District, Ayagama, Balangoda, Ratnapura, Palmadula, Divitigala, Kuruvita, Opanayaka, Alapata, Kalavana, Imbulpe, Ahliyagoda and Kiriyalla Division Secretary Divisions in Ratnapura District.
Taking you to the political front, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the chairman of provincial councils in the country are still being paid by the government, although provincial councils are not providing a service to the general public. Addressing a gathering in Jaffna, the opposition leader went on to state that provincial council elections, which were postponed last year due to a lack of funds, will be held before the end of this year.
The 228th edition of the Sakwala program was held at the Kottawate AMTM school in Jaffna under the patronage of opposition leader Sajith Premadasa. Sri Lanka Freedom Party member and deputy chairman of committees of the parliament, MP Angajan Ramanathan, also joined the event.
We are grateful that the deputy chairman of the committees of the parliament, MP Anganathan Ramanathan, is joining us today. His and my visions are very similar. We both believe that a knowledge-based economy must must be built. Some politicians are playing games with the people in Jaffna. I am sad to say that all provincial councils that were established through the 19th Amendment are inactive. Chairmen of provincial councils are taking salaries without doing anything. However, the service to the public is not being carried out. I assure you that before the end of the year, we will hold the provincial council elections. After gaining the trust of the general public, I assure you that we will implement the 13th Amendment to the Constitution.
Still in politics, leader of the National People's Power, Kumara Dissanayake, assures that the NPP will make the biggest political transformation in Sri Lanka. Addressing a gathering in Tangol, the NPP leader said that they will move to dissolve parliament on the same day if they gain victory in the presidential polls this year.
The Hambantota District Youth Conference of the National People's Power was held in Tangor last evening under the patronage of NPP leader Kumara Dissanayake.
Although governments changed after elections, the lives of the people remain unchanged. The elections only changed the ones in power. Basil Rajapaksa swindled money when Mahinda Rajapaksa was in power and Ravi Karunanayake stole during Ranil Wickremesinghe's time. However, following elections, there is never significant change in the ones who hold power. For instance, Mahinda Amaraveera served in all governments from Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga to present. During a recent gathering in Ambalantota, Amaraveera said that the party he is supporting will always win. That is because he always stands with the party which is most likely to win the election. For the first time in Sri Lanka, we have been given the opportunity to make a real political change. It doesn't come into effect naturally without any effort. Strong political changes occur at the most critical times. We contested for the 1994 election. However, only Nihal Galapathy from the Hambantota district constituency was able to secure seats in the parliament. Yet we continue to contest for more elections after that, although we only have 3 parliamentary seats. That is because in politics, there will always be an opportunity to gain power. It is our responsibility to hold still until we were given that opportunity. However, now is the time for the NPP to take over this power. The NPP is ready to make the biggest political transformation in the country. We will dissolve parliament on the same day we achieve victory from this presidential election. No more time will be wasted.
And before we bring you more political affairs, we move on to news in brief. The body of an individual believed to be aged between 40 and 45 years was found on the Pohodaramulla beach in Vadua this morning. The victim is suspected to have been murdered. The identity of the deceased is yet to be ascertained. Here's a look at other local news in brief now.
The police special task force today arrested 3 individuals believed to be associated with a large-scale drug trafficker and organised criminal. The trio had narcotic substances valued at 300 million rupees as well as 2 pistols at the time of the arrest, which took place in Kasbaba. Police also seized 2 vehicles under suspicion of being used by the suspects to carry out the distribution of narcotic substances. Meanwhile, 40 persons, including 5 female drug traffickers, were arrested during an operation conducted in the Dematagod area as part of the Yuktiya special operation. Police were able to seize heroin, stashes of money earned through drug trafficking and 10 mobile phones during the operation. In other news, an individual was shot dead in Rana last night. It was revealed that the deceased was a 51-year-old businessman who owned a hardware shop. The death of the businessman is yet to be ruled out as a murder or a suicide attempt.
Welcome back to the news. The Locomotive Operating Engineers Union called off their 4-day railway strike today. Following a successful discussion with Minister of Transport and Highways, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena, the trade union said the decision was reached. Meanwhile, the Transport Minister, convening a media briefing, said that the government has not taken a decision to privatise the Railways Department. However, asked unions not to pressure the government into taking such decision.
The Locomotive Operating Engineers Union launched trade union action on the 6th of June over delays in second-class promotions of locomotive drivers and several other reasons. Due to today's cancellation of trains, passengers were severely inconvenienced. This afternoon, the Locomotive Operating Engineers Union came to a decision to call off the strike action after discussions with the Minister of Transport, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena, at the ministry.
The minister accepted that our issues must be addressed. He further stated that it is necessary to expedite the recruitment of officers. From tomorrow onwards, we will try our best to bring train operations back to normal. We also cannot recruit according to our will. The government has completely halted recruitment due to the economic crisis.
ජනතාව දැන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා මේක පුද්ගලීකරණය කරන්න කියලා. ඇත්තට මේකට වැඩපිළිවෙලක් නැහැ.
The government has not taken a decision about it. We are asking the railway employees not to push the government towards that decision.
Minister of Education Dr. Susil Premajayantha is of the view that political representatives will divide into factions based on the main candidates of the presidential election within the next few weeks. Meanwhile, outlining India's recently held election as an example of a proper democratic society, independent parliamentarian Professor G.L. Peris pointed out that elections must be held at the right time without delay. Here's a look at some political excerpts.
13 ව්‍යවස්ථාව ඇත්තටම මේ රටේ නීතියක්. ඒතකොට මේ රටේ නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න එපා කියලා කවුරු හරි තර්ක කරනවා නම් ඒකත් ව්‍යවස්ථා විරෝධී කතාවක්. ඉඩම් බලතල පොලිස් බලතල නෙමෙයි. පළාත් සභා නිශ්චිත වශයෙන් නොපවත්වා 13 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථාව ක්‍රියාවට නැංවීම අත්හිටවීම හරහා තමයි ඒක එහෙම පිටින්ම ඇන හිටියේ. ඒ නිසා සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්මයා අදහස් කළේ දැනට ආණ්ඩුව විසින් අත්හිටවලා තිබෙන 13 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනයේ පළාත් සභා ක්‍රියාවට නැංවීම වහා ආරම්භ කරනවායි කියන පණිවිඩය තමයි දීලා තිබෙන්නේ.
අනිවාර්යෙන් මැතිවරණ තියෙනවා ජනාධිපතිවරණ. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අවසාන මාස 3 තමයි ඔය හරියට පිල් ටික බෙදෙන්නේ. දැන් ඒක දැන් පටන් ගන්න තියෙනවා. ඊළඟ සති 2-3 වෙනකොට ප්‍රධාන අපේක්ෂකේ වටා ඒ අවශ්‍ය කණ්ඩායම බෙදෙවි.
සජිත් අද නිකන් රූකඩයක් විහිළුවක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. සජබෙට ටෙලිෆෝන් එක අතහරින සිද්ධ වෙනවා. දැන් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ලකුණ වෙන්න තියෙන්නේ හිස් පුටුව.
ඉන්දියාවේ මැතිවරණයක් ප්‍රතිඵල නිකුත්. කවුරුත් සැක කළාද මේ මැතිවරණය පවත්වයිද නැද්ද කියලා. ඒව විවාදයක් කිසිම ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී සමාජයක ඇතිවන්නේ නැහැ. නිසි කල මැතිවරණ පවත්වන්න ඕනේ. ඒක නියතයි, නිශ්චිතයි.
Taking you to your headline-making business news, the number of tourists who visited Sri Lanka so far this year has crossed 900,000, showing promise that Sri Lanka is getting closer to the year-end target of 2.3 million tourists at the end of the year. During the period from January 1st to June 9th last year, 550,198 arrivals were recorded. This year's arrivals during the same period show a surge of 375,866 to 926,064 so far this year. Meanwhile, during the month of June so far, Sri Lanka has welcomed a total of 29,285 tourists. Weekly tourist arrivals report of Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority showed that 25,712 arrivals were recorded during just the first 10 days of last year. The most number of tourist arrivals were reported from India, followed by the United Kingdom, China, Australia and Bangladesh. According to SLTDA's monthly tourist arrivals report, 164,500 Indian tourists, 111,604 Russian tourists had visited Sri Lanka since the beginning of this year. And taking you to the Colombo Stock Exchange, equities closed in green today, boosted by gains in energy and financial stocks. The Colombo Stock Exchange's all-share price index climbed 0.54% to settle at 12,381.49 after logging a 1.71% increase in the previous week. Hunter and Company and LOLC Holdings were the top gainers on the index, rising 6% and 4.3% respectively. Trading volume on the ASPI rose to 63.4 million shares from 38.2 million in the previous session. The S&P SL20 meanwhile climbed 0.76% to end trading at 3,683.25. Equity markets turnover rose to 1.69 billion rupees from 1.27 billion in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to turnover, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 161.1 million rupees, and domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 164 billion rupees. Up next is senior analyst from Capital Alliance, Amrut Fernando, with a few thoughts to round off our Markets in View segment for the week.
Last week, the domestic equity market rose throughout the week, fueled by a rebound in investor sentiment, and ended the week on a positive note, with the ASPI up 208 points to 12,314 compared to the previous week. The S&P SL20 also followed this trend, rising 87 points to settle at 3,655 points. Total market turnover for the week also increased by 15% to 5.7 billion rupees, with domestic participation improving. This week, we anticipate a positive trend in equity market due to the IMF's second review, which is set for Wednesday, and progress made regarding the country's bilateral debt agreements. Moreover, with regards to market regulations, a shorter settlement cycle to T+2 for equity transactions comes into effect to the CSE from today. Moving on to last week's Treasury bill auction, a total of 235 billion rupees was raised, with interest rates marginally rising for the 3 and 12-month bill, while the 6-month bill remained flat. Looking ahead to this week's Treasury bill auction, the government aims to raise 215 billion rupees. And on the international front, major US stock indexes moved up last week as stronger than expected jobs data pointed to a robust economy, but prompted worries the Fed would delay rate cuts.
Taking you to corporate affairs now, Lanka PLC announced that it entered into an agreement to jointly develop the 4.9 megawatt Beliatta solar power project in Hambantota with a group of promoters led by Celtech International Private Limited. The project is expected to cost approximately 1 billion rupees in total. With that, here's a look at more corporate affairs in brief.
Lanka PLC disclosed entering into an agreement with a consortium led by Celtech International Private Limited to develop the 4.9 megawatts Beliatta solar power plant in Hambantota. This project, which is estimated to incur a total cost of 1 billion rupees, was finalized on the 31st of May this year. In its corporate disclosure, Lanka PLC added that the company will hold a majority stake of 50.1% of the project company, Beliatta Solar Project Private Limited. In the meantime, Unilever Sri Lanka, together with Abans Electricals PLC, recently inaugurated a new 2.33 megawatt solar power project at its Horana factory. The project, which aligns with Unilever's Global Climate Transaction Action Plan, incurs a total investment of 1.3 million euros. This project also contributes to the goals set by the Ministry of Electricity and Energy in Sri Lanka for transitioning the country's electricity supply to renewable sources by 2030. Also in corporate news, TransAsia Hotels PLC announced the sale of 2,540 shares in the relevant company by N.L. Gunaratna, non-executive independent director of the company. In its disclosure, the company said that 2,000 shares were sold at 40 rupees, while the remaining 540 shares were sold at 40 rupees and 10 cents. The relevant transaction was notified to the board of the company today.
Welcome back, taking you to your top international news. In France, President Emmanuel Macron dissolved the lower house of parliament in a surprise announcement after his centrist political party was handed a humbling defeat by the far right in the European elections. According to the first exit polls, the far right National Party won around 32% more, double Macron's pro-EU coalition, which received 15% of the vote. The first round of France's parliamentary election will be held on the 30th of June, and a second round is scheduled for the 7th of July. After the publication of the exit poll, leader of the National Rally, Jordan Bardella, had called on Macron to dissolve the French Parliament. Since the beginning of his second term in 2022, Macron has been ruling with a relative majority, forcing him to invoke Article 49.3 of the French Constitution several times, which passed through Parliament without a vote. And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. I'm Indivariya Muatta. Have a pleasant evening.